But then I just did it. I just quit my job, had 5 months of savings, and I told myself I needed to get at least one other person convinced that they would give me their money to do it, because otherwise, I would be fooling myself, and got into Y Combinator, and the rest is history.
South Asians are one of the largest diasporas in the world and fastest growing demographics in the United States. Yet our stories are often misrepresented or missing entirely from mainstream media. Snigdha Sur has set out to change that. As the founder and CEO of The Juggernaut, a platform providing deep, context-driven coverage of the South Asian experience, Snigdha has made it her goal to ensure these stories are told authentically. Before starting her own media company, she worked at McKinsey and advised major outlets like BuzzFeed and Quartz. With degrees from Harvard and Yale and a career grounded in business, she is reshaping the narrative around South Asian representation in media. Snigdha, thank you for joining us today on That Desi Spark. We're thrilled to have you here.
Hi, Hitha. Always a pleasure speaking to another only child, my favorite thing in the world.
Speaking of being an only child, I really do want to start at the beginning. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh my goodness. I think so first of all, when I was a little kid, I don't really remember too early on what I wanted to, let's say when I was 3 years old, but I do remember the things that I got in trouble for. And a lot of it was things that I guess I'm doing now, which is I would take pens and just scribble everywhere. I would take Sharpies and scribble them on our rented apartment wall, to the chagrin of my mother, who's like, we have to repaint this. Like, this is Sharpie on the wall. And I think I felt at some age when I was like maybe around 5 or 6 that I wanted to be a novelist or a writer. So I knew that quite early on. And my youngest memory is of getting in trouble a lot for scribbling everywhere, because why is everything not a writing surface? Everything is a writing surface for me. So.
I completely agree, and so does my 5-year-old. So
correct.
What's something your parents did or didn't do that kind of shaped you into who you are today?
Okay, so I think my biggest advice, and I got really lucky with my parents because my mom is genuinely the opposite of me. She is like very quiet and introspective and observant and thoughtful about a lot of things for a child who is always a little bit more gregarious and a little bit not following her directions. So I think the biggest thing my parents did was truly let me be, I think. And I know that's hard to hear in 2025 when parents are like, the number one question I get a lot from aunties and uncles is, how do I make my child like you? And I then tell them sorry to disappoint you, but the biggest thing my mom did was just let me be me. I think I told her I wanted to do this thing called the spelling bee, and she was like, what is this? Fine, we'll figure it out. Go do the spelling bee. And I remember I used to get so irritated at her because she, couldn't pronounce them perfectly the way the spelling bee coach or pronouncer does, Dr. Jacques Bailey. And I used to get irritated, but she put in so many hours of saying those words out loud so I could practice and spell it out. So I think a lot of what they did that I was really lucky to have is that they kind of went along with my crazy adventures, whether it was spelling bee, whether it was going to a high school near here where you don't really sleep because you're doing homework all the time, to going off to a consulting firm and they're like, what is this? We don't really understand. But if you understand, if you're cool with it, go for it, I would say.
That's incredible. And I think that's something I've heard from other guests is my parents let me be bored, or my parents let me lead and they supported, which I think is so important for a kid to have some freedom.
Yeah, and you have two really cute kids. I feel how do you see that come out in your life?
I mean, I try to follow my parents' advice, and I don't try to overschedule them.
Yeah.
And I want to keep things open and let them be bored, because I think in boredom comes incredible spurts of creativity, which help you get to the path of where you are and launch a business that has impacted so many people's lives by bringing nuance and in-depth storytelling to something that is often quite dismissive. Before we get there, I want to talk about your path to the Juggernaut. So as you mentioned, you spent time in consulting at McKinsey. You also spent time in Mumbai working in film. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I have been obsessed with Hindi cinema since as young as I can remember as well. And I think it was something I learned from my dad he would share all these stories about, growing up, they didn't have much. And so he was one of 4 brothers. And he also had 4 sisters, but for some reason, these sisters were not part of the story. So I don't know what boys are up to these days. So he and his 4 brothers, or he and his 3 brothers, the 4 brothers would go to their parents and ask for pocket money for basically, I guess, 4 people, right, to go see the movies. But they were really greedy. So instead of seeing 1 movie, they want to see 2 movies. So what they would do is they would send 2 people on 2 tickets to watch 1 movie. Then the other 2 brothers would go for post-intermission. Then they would go watch another movie and do the same thing. And then they would talk about the other storylines over dinner. And I thought that was such a hilarious thing to like get up to when you were a little kid. And growing up, no matter how little we had, on the weekends, I still remember my dad taking me and my mom to go to Jackson Heights and renting that VHS, or going to Eagle Theater and watching that Bollywood movie. And we would also go to Blockbuster and rent some American movies as well. And when I was an undergrad, my second major was South Asian Studies, which many people don't know. So a lot of my trolls loved hating on me. They're like, who is this Indian American girl who doesn't know anything? She's ABCD. First of all, that's not true. I'm not American born. And second of all, I just find it really funny because I probably know more about South Asian history than they do. But when I was an undergrad, I took this amazing class called Understanding Bollywood. And that class changed my life because it was actually studying this passion I had. And the way, this Bombay thing came about is when I was a 20-year-old, I just asked everybody I knew, which is not many people. I was like, hey, I want to intern in Bollywood. How do I make this happen? And lo and behold, this white guy in my Hindi class, thank you, Colin Murphy, his mom was a journalist, and she was in journalism school with another woman who ended up becoming a producer in Bollywood. So Colin connected me to his mother, who connected me to this woman in India, and she set me up with my Bombay internship at Excel Entertainment. So before anybody else got to hear about Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara or Dawn 2, I was sitting there as a 20-year-old reading those scripts. And I was like, this is gonna be a banger movie, this is gonna be awesome. And that same summer, I was interviewing using my Excel Entertainment internship. I would ask my colleagues to introduce me to more people they thought were cool. So I ended up interviewing everyone from Vikramaditya Motwane to Anurag Kashyap to Dibakar Banerjee, all these really cool writers, directors. So where does it go from here? When I was working at McKinsey, after I graduated from my 2-year program, I really wanted to do something that wasn't like an Excel monkey situation. Nothing wrong with Excel wizards. I was one too, and I am one, but I wanted something a little bit more creative. So put that energy out there. I was like, hey, what if I did a year in Bombay? What would that look like? And so I reached back out to a lot of my contacts from my sophomore summer when I was 20, and ended up working a little bit in Bollywood again. And so I worked at Phantom Films, RIP Phantom Films, it's now no longer exists. But I was working with Vikramaditya Motwane, reading scripts and kind of telling him what I thought. I don't know if I was useful to him at all. I don't know to this day, but he let me be me and come into the office, read the scripts, meet a lot of people. And there I got to read the scripts such as Masan, which is an award-winning film that won an award at Cannes. And it also launched Vicky Kaushal. Can you imagine? Like, these are scripts I'm reading as a 20-year-old, 24-year-old that also had such an impact on cinema and global cinema. So I would say that really affected me because it made me believe, going back to what you're saying, that you can do anything, right? Just like ask. And that's also probably why we have just really special privileged access to a lot of Hindi cinema people, because of these random connections I had from when I was 20.
That's incredible. And I want to continue on with the let me be me, because The Juggernaut is really rooted in your personal story and journey of let me be me, but it also captures so many of our stories, growing up either third culture kids or second generation straddling 2 different worlds. What was the moment like when you had the idea for The Juggernaut, and what was the first thing you did after that idea struck?
Yeah, I think what's so interesting about, and I've spoken a little bit about this before, about what I've observed in many of my female founder friends, is that we often think of these ideas quite early, but we don't give ourselves permission to pursue them unless we do something else first.
Yeah.
And so I would say the first iteration I had of this was in 2014, where I wanted to build a Netflix for Bollywood, because it was just so difficult to find great Hindi cinema. If you can imagine, even back in 2012, 2013, Netflix's catalog and Amazon Prime's catalog, if one can imagine, I know we can't imagine this today, for Indian films was quite crap, frankly. I would literally have to go to India and buy like 30 DVDs. Can you imagine? Like DVDs, what are DVDs? What are DVDs? So to go buy like 20 to 30 DVDs and like, so I can watch these films over and over, it was so difficult to find. And the reason that I had that idea was kind of the same reason that companies like, there's a company called Drama Fever, which took, I believe, Korean dramas and streamed them all over the world. And I was like, that's the idea. Like I had seen what was happening with K-drama. I was like, you know, this is global. I think there would be more people than just people in India watching them. And my friend quickly was like, Netflix is gonna beat you to the punch. They're gonna be so fast at this. Like this is never gonna survive. So that was my first idea. Those were all the kernels of something that I wanted to build for myself, something that I felt that could be global in nature, and something that I felt really elevated and preserved South Asian culture. So those were kind of the elements. I revisited all of this in, I guess, 2016, 2017. I was working with this amazing woman, Gitanjali, and she wanted to do kind of this more of an entertainment lifestyle kind of property. And I started working with her on it. And I was like, as I was working with her on it, I was like, wait, I see a lot of elements of even what I was thinking about with this. But I didn't want to make it just about entertainment. I really wanted to make it more universal. And we kind of parted ways because I think we had different visions, and she had a kid that she had to get through college, and I was like, okay, fine, let me think about this. But I didn't do anything for over a year or two. When I finally really thought about it, it was aha moment was when I was dating my now husband, which is crazy to say, he's my husband now, happened a month back. And he was like, you know, you kind of write this weekly newsletter on the side. I was doing it while I was working at McKinsey. And I wrote it on the weekends, but honestly, it'd be once every 2 months, every 3 months, every 7 months. He's like, you seem the most happy when you're doing that and you're so busy during the week. How do you find time to do that? And B, can you ever make it into a business? And I thought he was being ridiculous. I was like, how do you make this into a business? But then I just did it. I just quit my job, had 5 months of savings, and I told myself I needed to get at least one other person convinced that they would give me their money to do it, because otherwise, you know, I would be fooling myself, and got into Y Combinator, and the rest is history. But my TLDR from that entire story, which I hope is helpful to other founders or would-be founders, is that sometimes there isn't just one moment.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's all these moments throughout your life that kind of tell you there's something out there that you might be just dancing around or just near the kind of kernel of, but you know, when there's enough signals and when there's enough noise, when there's enough people telling you, just follow where your energy is and where you find yourself energized, and just try to go for it.
You did something really interesting with the thesis of The Juggernaut, which is long form written journalism that went super deep into stories in a time where the media companies launching was focused on short brevity or video or audio podcasts. What was the intention behind you going in a direction none of your peers at the time are going into?
Such a great question. I think so much of what sometimes people end up doing is constraints. So I didn't have the budget of, you know, when Axios launched, they had $10 million. So they had $10 million to experiment and go really deep and hire like 300 people, or I don't know how many people they hired, but they hired a bunch of people to launch all these specific newsletters, and their thesis was smart brevity. In a weird way, even if they didn't do smart brevity, the very fact that they had so much volume meant that they were growing their audience and they were doing so well in so many different verticals. I didn't have that. So I was like, what is the minimum viable thing I can do that will still deliver value to my customers? And so we did one feature a weekday, which is 5 stories a week, which isn't even that much. But then we were like, if we're gonna do only 5 stories a week, we have to make them meaty, because otherwise people are not gonna go into it. And then when we started experimenting, we did have some shorter form content before, but they wouldn't really do well. We found that a lot of South Asian history, culture, insight is trapped in academia or our oral histories. Like, you'll have some insight about Bridgerton, which I know you do, but then it's like in your brain or in your group chats. It's not in the world. And so what we realized also was when you look at the data, if you read any article, whether it's New York Times, Axios, Wall Street Journal, look at the sourcing. How many times do you see a South Asian source? Rarely, unless they're a doctor, actually. If it's a doctor, oh my God, 80% chance it's a South Asian source. But other than that, any other story, like there was a story about the pandemic queen of yoga, and no, it was not Aditi. It was this white
Adrienne.
woman. Yes.
Yoga by Adrienne, yeah.
Yes. And I was looking through the sourcing, and I was like, you couldn't find South Asians who do yoga? Like, because of course it would disprove their thesis because they probably are not following this woman. But it was one of those things where I was like, that was another really big pillar, which is I'm going to be doing community-oriented journalism. So when you look at the Juggernaut stories, and you've shared so many of our stories, and you've been a source for so many of our stories, what we'll do is say, hey, do you have a thought on X, Y, or Z? And we're pulling from our own community because we want journalism to be democratic. Like, anybody can be a source. We all have something to share. So I think those elements were different. In 2025, what I will say though is that like I have noticed that there's been some horrifying studies, I know it'll be horrifying to you, you're such an avid reader as well, where it looks like Gen Z is just not reading as much. So that is a little bit scary, and I do think that that would lead me to believe that, you know, I would love to experiment more in formats like even these, like podcast videos, or if I can get to my audience in the way that meet them where they are. So I would definitely do that if I raised even more capital or had the ability to experiment with those formats. But so much of what I was doing at the time was honestly by constraints. So constraints are not bad. Constraints can be really great, make them work for you. But if you ever notice that the constraint is like kind of taking over you, which I'm starting to feel like, do I want to stick to this? Do I want to do something else? Has it changed in the last 6 years? It definitely has. Then that's when you want to kind of tell yourself, how do I get the resources to test this other theory I have? But so much of it is hypothesis testing.
You had a really interesting observation in 2023 where you identified that your word of the year was persistence.
Yeah.
And it was a year you had to focus on what you did and what the brand did excellently, really be scrappy with capital, and ask for help. Yes. And that was a time of huge growth for the Juggernaut that year. What is your word for 2025? And what are some of the ideas you have to bring that to reality?
Oh, I love that question. For 2025, I'm thinking more, I would say my word is probably 2 words. It's more big swings. I think for 2023, it felt like a year where it was just genuinely very tough. And I actually think the persistence thing really helped. We did a lot of these growth experiments that led to crazy like growth in our newsletter. We more than doubled our newsletter reader with just one change, with just one website change. I think we have over 135,000 newsletter readers now, and just a year ago it was like 55,000. So that's what I'm trying to say is like that word persistence was super helpful because I just didn't have much to give at that time. I was like, how do I squeeze more out of what I already have? This year, I'm feeling more big swings because 2025, I think, has been an interesting year where it's already felt a little bit chaotic. I don't know if you felt that.
Very much.
A lot chaotic.
A lot chaotic.
And I think it's been a year where I don't think anybody feels really stable. So I'm like, wait, can I lean into this? Can I make this a strength? If I don't feel stable, can I reorient or rejig everything I'm thinking about? And so this year I'm trying to be a little bit, I would say be kinder to myself, but also aim for those big swings and try to make things happen. So like this is, I haven't even verbalized this actually largely to anybody else, but I was thinking today, I was like, wait, like, you know, we've always done the Juggernaut Summit in New York City. I was like, should I do our summit this year in SF? Like that's my other big kind of, that's where my other big kind of network is. All my investors, basically, except for you, are and a few others. Most like 90% of my investors are in SF. So I'm like, I could do something really great there. So I think this is the year where I think I'd like to tell people like, think about things in a completely different way. Why not?
I love that. I do want to talk about, you've been through some challenges for the past couple of years, and you've also grown the company tremendously through those challenges. How have you managed to stay grounded and stay focused in a very noisy and sometimes really negative climate?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question. I would say that so much of what I've learned in the past few years is just kind of what I started with, which is like energy management. You know, challenges are important because, as they say, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. At the same time, some challenges, frankly, have no lessons for you. They're just unfortunate incidents that are unfair and unjust and like, why did this happen to me situation. But I always switch it to, where's the agency? And so my agency is, I don't have to let certain people affect me. I don't have to let certain people's drama affect me. I don't have to let negative energy affect me. All I have to care about is my own customers and staying true to my belief over and over. So how I show up to my customers, how I show up to my sponsors, how I show up to my mission, my storytelling. The moment that, you know, someone kind of brings negative energy into your life, my advice always is to take a step back, figure out how to excise it, figure out how to go back to your roots, go back to your core, go back to what gives you positive energy and kind of delve into that and also fight back. I am Bengali. I believe in the power of Kali. So I have fought back on things. I might do it privately and not drag people publicly, but I might have filed a couple of lawsuits against people.
I mean, embody that energy because
Yes.
it's necessary, especially with, I hate to make things about our gender or our race, but the stats don't lie and the numbers don't lie. Women founders receive less than 2% of venture capital. If you're a woman of color, it's even less. And those are odds that you've just not beat, but you're also building a growing company it's really hard to do in any climate. It's especially hard to do right now. So I do want to give you a lot of credit for your work really providing ROI in a cultural capacity and from a business capacity.
Yeah, and I think to your point, like, I love that you shared those numbers because I love data. And by the way, Hitha is such a great supporter. She's been one of our early investors, and she puts her money where her mouth is. Like, unlike other people in our community, I think we have to talk about this. Sometimes it's very easy, it's very easy to see it. It's very hard to help it. It's something to talk about, which is, it's very easy to celebrate success when it's already happened. I think it's very hard to support people before there are obvious signs of success and be early. And that's what an angel investor is actually, right? It's about finding great ideas, great people, and supporting them no matter what, which is what I think you have a really great strength in. And to your point, let's talk about those numbers. It's 2%, less than 2% goes to women, and it's I believe 0.006% goes to women of color, and that was pre-pandemic. Post-pandemic, I read somewhere crazy that I think it was 0.0003%. Like, it went down. And it was like,
You think you're at the floor, and apparently no.
Apparently no. And I think that, like, one of the things, you might not have alluded to it directly, but I went through a challenge where I had former employees who were also women, trying to allege things about me that weren't true. And that made me just honestly disappointed, which is that, women already have to work so hard against the tides to prove anything to anybody. And then to have other people pile on to destroy something that, is so hard to even build in the first place. I don't have time for that energy anymore. Like, please take that energy somewhere else. Go build something yourself or go destroy something yourself. Like,
And to talk about the culture you have built, because something your other employees have said is the Juggernaut was the first place they worked where they could bring their whole selves to work. That's a really special thing that you have cultivated. How do you approach culture building, both within your organization, with your team, but also the culture that you've built for your readers and your community?
Yeah, I think so much of culture goes back to what you don't want. And it's something we've talked about a lot. So for example, and also I have to admit that so much about us startups culture can be founder driven, right? It's so much of what the founder is imbuing there. So I actually did an exercise that was super helpful. Sequoia actually has a great deck on this. It's one of the biggest and most successful venture firms in Silicon Valley. They have an entire thing called a culture deck. And so I went and created a culture deck with my team. And culture is something that has teeth. It's the actions and behaviors and values that you espouse that lead to certain outcomes. When things feel really tough, what can you do to get out of it? And so for the Juggernaut, I had to think about, like, what are the behaviors and outcomes I want to see? So one of our things that I'm really proud of in our culture is that we say, be ambitious. And the story we put in our statement is there were two groups of people, and one of them was told to make a 14-inch tall bridge. Another one was told to build a 21-inch tall bridge. They had the same materials. They all had index cards and paper clips. The 14-inch bridge people allegedly made a 17-inch bridge, and they felt so proud of themselves. They're like, look at us, we beat our target by 3 inches. I think the 21-inch bridge group built a bridge that was 20 inches. Now, note, that 20 inches is taller than the 17 inches, but they felt really bad about themselves. They're like, oh no, we missed our target. But guess what? I tell my team, I'd always want you to be the 21-inch bridge people. I want you to people that aim for, like, the craziest, amazing, most thing. Like, I'm obsessed with Fawad Khan, so I was like, I really want to interview with him. So that became one of my things. It's still on my list. One of my other teammates, I think she wanted to really interview, like, Madhur Jaffrey. And I was like, go for it. Another one wanted to interview Padma Lakshmi. I was like, I know Padma Lakshmi. We can make that happen. So, like, always be the most ambitious thing you can be, because even if you fall a little bit short, guess what? You've done more than a person who isn't aiming higher. So that's something that's really important to me. Now, in terms of how you make sure everyone's bringing their whole selves, I don't think I balance this always perfectly, because I think I'm a bit casual as a founder. I very much I'm the kind of person who shares stuff about my partner And I also ask, like, are you seeing anyone? Like, can I help you? Like what's going on in your dating life? And so, what's going on in your personal life? Are you on a soccer team? So I tend to know a lot more about my teammates than the average founder, I guess. It cuts both ways. It means that, like, I think people feel really comfortable with me, but it also feels that sometimes they don't realize I'm their boss. And so I haven't nailed that yet, because as a boss, you do have to sometimes make tough decisions, which is give really tough feedback. Sometimes you have to let people go. Sometimes you have to give people warnings about ethics issues. And I think sometimes that boundary, people do have to realize at the end of the day that we can be friendly and we all are bringing our whole selves, but we also have to, like, do work. And so I think that that's something I think about a lot, is like, if you really want people to bring their whole selves, you have to be vulnerable yourself first. That means you have to be your full self first. And if you can't be your full self at your own job, you're not building the right startup. So I would say, think about that for a second.
That's really valuable, extremely valuable. What's something you want to do with the Juggernaut that you haven't done yet?
I've said this for so many interviews, I hope that I'm not jinxing it, but I really want to build a movie studio. I really think that we have so many incredible ideas locked up in our articles, and there are so many people I'd love to collaborate with, from Riz Ahmed's company, which has made some really incredible shorts, an Oscar-winning short actually, to Mindy Kaling's production company, which I think mostly has done comedy, but I think there's so much scope for her to expand beyond if she ever wants to do it. I just think there's just so much opportunity. There's so many South Asian stories to tell. So I think that's something that I really would love to see one day, maybe for my kids, which is like, if I ever have any, which is they get to go to the theaters, or maybe it's on their TikTok and they watch a movie and it says, co-produced with the Juggernaut Studios. Like, that is a dream of mine.
I love that. If you were to sit down with your younger self, what would you tell her?
I would say, enjoy your summers and enjoy your free time. I think that I never realized, and this might be true for you too, I didn't realize how golden life is from ages 0 to 14. So after 14, I went to Stuyvesant High School, and if anybody knows Stuyvesant, you don't really sleep. And so I don't think I've ever really had much of a break since age 14, which is kind of sad to say. But I mean, do things you love, right? Because you're not gonna have much of a break. So I would say, if I would tell my younger self, enjoy all those moments, enjoy boredom, go play outside for as long as you can, and be better about keeping people's phone numbers so you don't lose touch, I would say. But I think something I still tell people when they intern with me, a lot of younger kids, whenever you have a moment where you have a free summer or you're switching jobs, don't do that silly thing where you have 1 week off between switching jobs. Like, if you're ever leaving the Juggernaut and you're joining another team, I literally said, try to get a month. Like, go on vacation. Like, be completely unplugged, because their moments are so rare. Really appreciate those moments you have when you are not responsible for anything else but yourself.
I love that. I needed that advice too. So thank you so much for joining us at that Desi Spark, and best of luck with everything you're building. We will definitely be watching and cheering and supporting.
Yay, thank you, Hitha. I will be sharing this.